Here's how you can become fluent like a native speaker in any language you want. For me, this is the most effective process. I used these methods myself, and now I'm able to speak 6 different languages: German, Vietnamese, English, Spanish fluently, Korean, and French on a basic level. To get to this point, I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of trial and error, but after I did a lot of research on this topic, I think I found a way on how to do it most efficiently. In language science, I've explored the different ways how to learn a language. There's a 70-30 rule that I think is really useful. You should learn your languages 70% through output, 30% through input. What is output and what is input? Output basically means everything that you put out, just like the name says. Whenever you use a language actively, when you talk or when you write an essay. Input, on the other hand, is everything that you consume passively. Listening to a podcast or just reading specific text in a foreign language, that would be input. Now, the purpose of this goal, and I think most people actually want to be able to speak the language fluently, to communicate with other people. But if your goal is to become fluent in writing essays or whatever, the strategies you need to implement are gonna be different. But for the purposes of this video, I'll stick to the things that worked out for me. Going back to the 70-30 rule, you need to invest 70% of your time on actively trying to use the language. In this case, through speaking, because that's our goal in the end, right? Only 30% reading through listening to podcasts. The crazy thing is, in conventional way in school, we used to have a lot more input. At least in my high school, it was the other way around. 70% probably we used on input instead of output. We read a lot of textbooks, we listened to a lot of listening comprehension, and that really helped us to understand the different languages, for example English. But I wasn't really good at speaking. It wasn't until I switched these methods and started to speak a lot more where I could see really huge improvements in my English conversational skills. So now that we understand this concept of output and input, and let's talk about some specific actionable steps that I used to do and that you can implement in your routine as well. Now, speaking is the most important thing, but how do we speak? There's different scenarios, alright? The best case scenario is if you would have a foreign friend or a teacher that you can talk to on a daily basis. That would be the best ideal way, because not only talking in the foreign language is important, but also getting feedback in a foreign language. I used to have a thick German accent back then, and now I think native speakers can still hear it, but in comparison to my German peers or other people, I think I have a pretty decent accent. I have a lot of American friends, and they used to tease me for my wrong pronunciation. So whenever I said a word wrong, they would tease me, and I would have this negative experience within my mind where I'd be like, okay, I don't want to get teased anymore, so I'm going to improve my language skills. I'm going to improve my pronunciation. That's exactly what I did, right? But obviously, not everyone has access to a foreign friend that can teach them on a daily basis, especially. A teacher, not everybody has enough money to pay for that, or you don't have the courses in your uni. So what do you do in that case? With the power of the internet, there's really no excuse for you not to find a foreign friend. You can go on the internet. So many language exchange apps on the internet. I'm gonna put some names up here. For my Korean language skills, I used Tandem, which is a pretty good app where you can text and even call with native speakers. And that's a perfect way to first make a new friend, and obviously second, to practice your training skills, get some feedback. Talk to a Tandem person. Obviously make sure that they're not creepy, especially if you're a girl. Sometimes I heard that other people use Tandem sort of like a dating app. Just use your brain, and if it's gonna get weird, just block them. Most of the time, I at least made good experiences on those apps. Okay, in the worst case scenario, you don't find any foreign friend on the internet, you don't know what to do. In that case, you can still do something that I used to do back then as well. Because if you're really shy and introverted, maybe you're not open yet to talk to strangers, right? In that case, just talk to yourself. It sounds super weird, and it will feel super weird in the beginning. I used to do this whenever I took a shower or something. I used to just talk to myself, try to have a natural conversation like, David, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. What about you? And just like pretend that you're talking to another person, but that's basically you. I know it's kind of weird. I promise it's actually pretty helpful, because in that way, you're practicing sentence structures, you're practicing the output part, which is the most important part, like we mentioned before. Now we talked a lot about the output part, but what about the input part? A few strategies that I would implement. Number one, you want to immerse yourself and surround yourself with as much of the language as possible. Instead of scrolling through social media, I would create a new social media account, whatever platform you're using, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I would only follow other accounts in the respective language. So for example, when I started to study Korean, I wanted to immerse myself as much as I can with the Korean language, because it's so much different from all the languages that I already know, right? So I would create a new Instagram account, and on that account, I will only follow Korean idols, Korean podcasts, Korean language accounts, anything that has to do with Korean stuff. I was kind of like a career boo, I guess. Whatever. Whenever I felt like scrolling mindlessly on social media, I thought, okay, I can do that. I can scroll mindlessly through social media, but why don't I immerse myself with the Korean language? So I'd go on my Korean language account, on the new account, and just scroll. Obviously, in the beginning, you don't understand everything, but whatever you don't understand, just go on Google or Papago in that case. With Korean, they don't use Google Translator that often, but Papago. Through that, you're slowly increasing your vocabulary over time. Another good tip that I learned from Tim Ferriss is to learn only words or sentence structures that you think are most useful for the language. Sentence structures that you would use most of the time. When I studied Korean in Korea at my Korean university, it taught us some random vocabulary like farmer or planting a tree or shit like that. There could be one random day where I could need the word farmer, but how likely is that gonna be, right? Words like water or anything that you normally use on a daily basis in your own mother tongue. These are the words and sentence structures you should learn, memorize them in the beginning, because if you could learn 1,000 most used words in another language, that's already getting you to the next level. That's already enough to have basic conversation. Last but not least, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes. People might laugh at you. People definitely laughed at me when I first started to speak in Korean or in English or different languages. Forget about these haters. Tune them out, because in 2 years, 3 years, you will master the specific language, and then you will be the person who will laugh at them. It's fundamental to make mistakes in any new skill that you learn. The only way how you can get better. If you don't get any negative feedback, you're doing something wrong actually. If this video helped you out, please consider subscribing. I see you guys next week.